The Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre is a unique blend of industry, government and research partners working across Australian industry with key links internationally.
One of the biggest problems facing Australian capital cities is the provision of affordable housing, and particularly housing close to the infrastructure that we already have. Through this program of the Sustainable Built Environment, we've actually over the last 6 and 7 years looked at how do you build quality residential and affordable residential close to this prime public transport network. This is being helped and assisted by the fact that there's a new innovation called the trackless tram, which comes at about 1/10 of the cost of a regular tram. What this means is we can put a lot of people very close to public transport at a relatively low cost. The costs that can be saved is up to $110 billion for every million people that we house in this way. This is something we can't look past.
We've been talking about this net zero corridors, I suppose I said for the last 6 years, but in fact in 2009 I think it was that the City of Melbourne commissioned a report on this saying that corridors were a key part in addressing housing affordability and the viability of cities. And it's only now that we're starting to realise the importance of that resource. And a lot of what we're doing now is to try and leverage that information, but also the strategic asset management approach that government uses to look at what the value of these corridors are and how we can leverage that for housing affordability and better access and the health of our cities.
SBEnrc has been applied in 30 cities around the world, many in Europe, 5 largest Australian cities and Auckland, 4 North American cities, now 5 North American cities and 3 Asian cities. In Perth, we do not have mid-tier transit at the moment. We have commuter rail and we have the bus network. So here we have a very different opportunity to actually bring a new kind of context of urban development and transit into our city, which is also fast growing, but it is mostly growing in an outward direction. In Perth, we can actually take the opportunity or use mid-tier transit as a catalyst to enable more growth in the existing urban area, in inner suburbs, in middle suburbs, and thus strengthen the heart of the city, so to speak.
At the state level, both in projects and project formations, but also at the policy level, there's terms like well-located places when we talk about where do we build social and affordable housing projects. They need to be well located, or they should be well located. That's the policy, that's the state of the policy environment now. And well located means within a reasonable distance to established or planned transit nodes. What we're trying to advocate for and what we're researching is to what extent does policy need to acknowledge, encourage, and regulate the inclusion and the involvement and the integration across these sectors. Because within the engineering space and the built environment space, what we have is an environment where transit gets developed in one silo and housing gets developed in another silo. So everything from the governance to the procurement to the contractors that are building on site, they aren't integrated. And we want to understand better how to integrate from the outset. And that's why, in summary, the policy environment is one that acknowledges it, would support it, but it is up to the individual project levels and the individual communities to be able to ensure that that happens. Or there needs to be a broader change to policy, especially at the state level, to require it and to put incentives in place and other enforcement mechanisms, as well as explicit guidance on how to go about doing this integration in the current policy environment in order for that to be more conducive.
Governance is a incredibly important part of this. So having a mechanism by which the public sector and the private sector are able to combine the things they do best to create really powerful outcomes. So potentially part of that comes from the way in which we choose to procure a project. So have we really thought through whether we're bringing together the infrastructure investment with the urban development outcome in the same package? Or have we at least got a mechanism that allows the two procurement processes to speak to each other successfully? The second thing that's really important is timing, and the impact of time really can't be underestimated because it's a long-dated exercise to create a new bit of transport infrastructure. And development is also a long-dated exercise, and both of them are susceptible to different kinds of disruption. So we want to make sure that we're planning to have development in place by the time that the first train, arguably, comes along, or else we're in danger of losing that opportunity for value capture when it's at its most powerful.
We had a symposium where we brought everybody together. People from across Australia who are actually trying to do the same thing that I've been involved in for many years. And it was very inspiring for me to see how many people, hundreds of people, who clearly are now trying to change their cities in the same way and need our help to show them how. What is the procurement process and the governance system that will enable this to happen? And the symposium laid it out and showed that it is quite possible to do simply, efficiently and commercially. And we found that that was what people were interested in. Once they rode the trackless tram, there was no question that this was real, this is good, and it will enable developers to build around the stations. That's what most people need to see. And when they could see that this would attract investment, then you can see a breakthrough. Procurement has to then involve the developers, involve finance companies, as well as the communities and agencies that normally build public transport. But this needs developers because they build the housing. And the housing is what we now need.